Did you know the world's largest sunflower was 30 feet and 1 inch? Hi, my name is Katie from Lady Red Crafting, and today's video is all about sunflowers. Let's get started with craft number 1. For this craft, I'm starting with this sign that I got at the Dollar Tree, and we're going to remove the nautical piece on the front, and I'm just going to scrape that off and sand that down with my zip sander. Now we have a great blank slate to start our craft. I'm going to start out by using my Waverly Antique Wax, and we're going to stain the wood on the front side of this sign. And if you haven't done this before, you just paint the front using the wax, and then once you have painted the front, you just wipe it down with a paper towel or a baby wipe. Now I'm going to grab my Waverly paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to whitewash over the top of the stain. Now for this next step, I'm going to use 10 of these wood biscuits, and I did get these on Amazon, but you can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they're a size 0, and I'm just going to paint them with my yellow chalk paint from Waverly. And when I started painting them, they started moving all over the piece of cardboard, so I took a piece of painter's tape and I just laid that down, and I'm just going to place those little biscuits on top of the painter's tape, which will make it so easy to paint these. And we're not going to be painting the back side of these, so just worry about getting the front side and around the outside corners, because you'll still see those a little bit. I'm curious if any of you have used these wood biscuits in your crafts. If you have, leave me a comment below and let me know how you guys have used them. While these are drying, I'm grabbing another paintable surface, and I added a little piece of tape, and this is just a small circle round that I got in a package from Amazon. And I'm going to paint this brown with burnt umber paint from Apple Barrel, and this will be the center of our sunflower. Next, I'm going to take some of that same burnt barrel paint, and I'm going to just dry brush around the edges of our little petals. Now I'm going to set this all up ahead of time before I glue anything down, because I want to make sure I get the flower just right onto this surface. So you can see me here just laying all the pieces around, and it does take a little bit to get them where you want them to be. And once you're happy with your flower, I'm taking some wood glue, and this glue I did get at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to do a few petals at a time. And I'm just going to put the glue down and then place the petals back to where I want them onto the surface. And you might notice there that I'm using a little bit of hot glue after I've put the wood glue on, just to help them stick quicker before, so that way the wood glue has time to set. And once you have everything glued into place, you'll have this beautiful sunflower sign that's all ready to hang. Craft number 2. Moving on to the Give Thanks rolling pen. I really liked how this one looked. I think this was actually my favorite one out of all of the different rolling pens that they had at the Dollar Tree, but I did want to improve it a little bit. So we are going to remove that ribbon and the sticker from the back side of this pen. And if you noticed, I was using my hot tool to help loosen up some of that glue, and that does help a lot with removing some of those items. Next, I'm going to grab my blue painter's tape, and what we're going to do here is just tape around the handles on this rolling pen, because I want to paint the rolling pen handles a different color. And I grabbed burnt umber from Apple Barrel, and I thought the darker color would just give it a richer look. So we're just going to go ahead and paint over the rolling pin handles here. It did take me 3 coats to get a nice coat over the top of these. So I don't want you guys to have to worry about watching that. So with the magic of videos, we'll just have that all done for you in just a moment here. So now that all that paint has dried, we'll just remove the blue painter's tape. And I'm going to flip this Give Thanks over to the back side. And once we do that, we're going to put that on a paintable surface here. And I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Sandstone. And I'm going to do a nice thick coat on the back side of this rolling pen. And this paint covered pretty good, and I only had to do 1 coat. Next, I grab my heat tool and I just give it a quick dry. Now while that is finishing drying, I grab a napkin, and this napkin I did get on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description box below. I use a small piece of blue painter's tape so that I can separate the top layer off of the napkin. And we're going to decoupage this onto the back side of this rolling pin. So using my Mod Podge in matte, I'm just going to go ahead and paint the back side of this rolling pin. So once all of that Mod Podge has dried, I'm going to grab the napkin and we're just going to position it over the top of the rolling pin. And we're going to find a nice print on the napkin that we like. And then we're going to stop and cut a rectangle out of the napkin about an inch bigger than the actual rolling pin on each side. And once we've done that, we're going to lay that right down on top of the rolling pin, and I just grab a piece of parchment paper and I lay that over the top of the napkin, and using my iron, I just go ahead and iron that napkin right onto the Mod Podge. And that iron heats up that glue. If you haven't tried this before, it's amazing. And the napkin sticks to the rolling pin just perfectly. Next, I grab my zip sander, and if you haven't watched my videos before, it's one of my favorite tools in my toolbox. And I just start sanding in a downward motion. And I like to do this because, you know, I don't always cut a straight line. And if I have the paper a little bit bigger, I just get this nice little edge, and it just fits perfectly by sanding that at the end. And I really like how that looks. And if you notice there, I just had to touch up a little bit of paint on the handles because of the sander, but it looks great. Next, I grab my Mod Podge again and just do a nice top coat over the top of this napkin. And this ribbon's pretty wide. It's a little bit over an inch. And so I decided that I wanted to just cut lengthwise down the ribbon about 9 inches down, and then I just make 2 smaller ribbons. And what I'm going to do here is just make 2 basic bows, and we're going to go ahead and hot glue these onto our rolling pin. And I'm going to put one on one side for give thanks, and then I want to put the other one on the other side of the rolling pin, right about the same spot as the opposite side, just so that way it kind of gives it more of a seamless look. So either way you flip the rolling pin over, it just looks beautiful. This lovely rolling pin is now ready for your tiered tray. Let's roll right into craft number 3. So this is one of my favorite crafts from the video. It's really basic, but it's something that could be really fun to do with a group of people. If you get these cute little ceramic discs from the Dollar Tree, and then you can have all your guests bring different kinds of napkins, and you guys could do a napkin exchange and Mod Podge your napkins onto these cute discs. It would be so much fun. So back to the craft. So all I did here was remove the string from this cute little disc, and now I'm taking my napkin and I'm going to take a little piece of blue painter's tape to remove the backing on this napkin. Now I'm just going to trim the napkin up just to make it a little bit easier to work with, and then I'll set that aside. Now we're going to grab some Mod Podge, and I'm going to paint a nice layer of Mod Podge over the top of this disc. And once all of the Mod Podge has dried, we'll take the napkin and we're just going to center it onto the disc. Now I'm going to grab a piece of parchment paper and lay that over the top of the napkin. And using my iron, I'm just going to iron this napkin right onto the disc. Now I'm going to grab my handy dandy zip sander, and we're just going to sand in a downward motion all the way around the disc. And I'm using the back side of a paintbrush just to poke the holes back into the disc. And to seal this disc, I wanted to use triple thick because it gives a nice glossy coat on the top. And I'm just going to paint that over the top of the whole entire project. For the hanger on this, I'm going to use a ribbon in the color green just to kind of match up with the napkin. And I'm just going to tie a nice knot at the top. And for my final embellishment, I'll add a quick raffia bow right to the center. Now this project is complete. This is a fun, happy sign you're ready to hang. And as I said earlier, I really think this is a wonderful project for a group setting. Craft number 4. For this craft, we're going to start with a white candle from the Dollar Tree. I'm using an egg carton as an extra set of hands here, just to help hold everything in place. Next, we're going to take the top layer of a napkin and we're going to just paint the napkin straight onto this candlestick. What I've found with these napkins and this candle is it takes about 3 different turns to get the whole entire thing covered with the Mod Podge. So I'll start with one side and I will cover everything with the Mod Podge on that one side and set it aside for a half an hour to dry. And then I will flip the candle over and do the next third of the candle, and then I'll do the same thing a half an hour later on the last. On the last turn here, I do have to trim some of the napkin off of this candle, and we're just going to let that overlap just a little bit on the side. It'll be a small seam, but you won't really see it once you've laid down that Mod Podge. One thing I like about doing the Mod Podge in this technique is it gives the candle a different look. It's more of a rough and crinkly look instead of that smooth texture that we get when we iron down the Mod Podge. For the top of the candlestick, I did trim a lot of the napkin off, but I do Mod Podge down the rest along the top rim of the candle. And here's what it looks like when it's all dry. I did think that it needed a little extra, so I added a nice little twine bow to the top. And I think this candle just turned out lovely and it'll be a great addition to your fall decor. Craft number 5. For this craft, I'm using a board from the Dollar Tree, these beautiful stickers from the Dollar Tree, and this little cow. And we're going to make a sunflower cow sign. So we're going to start by taking this sign, and I'm going to use some painter's tape here, and we're going to tape off the frame of the sign. So once we get this frame taped off, we're going to paint the frame with the yellow maize chalk paint from Waverly. Now we're going to set this frame aside for a few minutes and we're going to start working on our cow. This will give the frame some time to dry. And for this cow, we're going to remove the hanger off of the cow, and I'm going to add these beautiful stickers all over the cow. And you can see here that I'm also making sure when I place these stickers on the cow that I'm going to cover those little holes that are on the cow because we don't want to see those. I just love how these flowers pop on the cow. It's just so pretty. So I wanted to make this sign a little bit more rustic, so I'm going to use some of my truffle paint, and we're just going to dry brush around the outside edge of this frame. And now that the frame is dry, we're going to remove the painter's tape. And I thought that the background was just a little bit too dark, so I am going to use a little bit more painter's tape, and I'm going to dry brush the inside of this sign with some Waverly chalk paint in the color white. So first I'll go ahead and tape this off so it'll make it a little bit easier because we don't want to get any of that white paint on the yellow. And now that our dry brushing is done, we'll go ahead and remove the painter's tape and set that aside to dry. And while that's drying, we'll use our paintable surface and lay down this Farm Fresh sign. And using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Maize, I'm going to paint this little Farm Fresh sign. And I believe I got this Farm Fresh sign from the Dollar Tree in a little pack during the fall season last year. And once that paint has dried, I'm going to add a tiny bit of antique wax from Waverly, and we're just going to do that to just match up the Farm Fresh sign to the frame of this picture. Now for the last step, let's just hot glue and put all of this together. So we're going to put the cow a little bit over center and then the Farm Fresh sign. And then I got these adorable little flowers off of Temu, and I'm going to add those as well just for some fun embellishments. And I just love how this sunflower happy cow turns out. It is so adorable. Craft number 6. For this craft, I'm going to start out with a fabric square that I got at the Dollar Tree. And it's this lovely fabric with all these beautiful sunflowers on it. And I'm going to start by just laying the fabric out and just looking at where I want to make my cuts. And I decided just to cut right on the fold. And I'm just going to cut straight down and make a nice little shape of a rectangle. And what I love about this craft is that you can take any piece of fabric, fabric square, scrap fabric, and cut out a rectangle. And once you have your rectangle, you can go ahead and start making these cute pumpkins. The first pumpkin here is 8 by 10, but you can make any size rectangle that you want. Next, we lay this piece of fabric face up, and using our hot glue gun, we're just going to place a line of hot glue along the bottom and fold over the piece of fabric, and then we're going to attach the ends of that fabric with more hot glue. We'll flip this piece of fabric inside out and make a little pillowcase. And once we have our pillowcase, I'm going to grab some polyfill, and I'm just going to stuff the pillowcase with the polyfill. You could also use an old pillow and use the stuffing from that as well if you don't have the polyfill. Now for the top of this pumpkin, I'm going to take a needle and thread, and I'm just going to do a basic gather stitch along the top. And if you haven't done one of these before, it's really simple. You just go ahead and you stick the needle through the fabric, and then you gather the fabric and stick the needle through the gathers. And you just do enough to fit on the needle, and then you pull the string through, and then you repeat that until you get all the way around the top. And once you get all the way around the top, you should be able to lightly pull the string, and it gathers all of that together like a drawstring and closes up your pumpkin. And once you finish stitching around the top of the pumpkin and you've pulled the string tight, I just do a quick knot using my needle there, and I just knot the string so that way everything stays nice and tight. Now for the next step, you can continue using the same string that you were using before to tie these knots, but I decided I wanted to use some twine just to give it a little bit more of a rustic look. And I just tied one piece of twine all the way around the pumpkin and then tied it tight. Next, I tied a second string around the pumpkin again, and this time I tied it around 2 times, making an X at the bottom and then tying again at the top. And this gives it 6 pleats in the pumpkin, and I feel that gives it more of a pumpkin look. And I just kind of rearrange these strings to make it look the way I want to. Now I grab a wine cork, and this one I had used for a previous craft, so I'd already cut the tip of the wine cork off, and I liked the rustic look that it had on it. So I just glued down the wine cork into the center of the pumpkin there, and I just kind of pushed open the pumpkin a little bit to get that wine cork in there to make the stem. In the past, I've also taken those wine corks and I've wrapped them with fabric, or I've painted them. But I find that the wine cork, the shape of it is just perfect for the stems on these fabric pumpkins. Next, I cut some of that twine off and I made a quick little bow, and I'm gonna add an extra raffia bow over the top of that just to give it more bow finesse, and that big pumpkin is done. And then for the second pumpkin here, I used a smaller piece of the fabric and I wanted to make a mini pumpkin, and you can do the same thing. And this just gives you a nice close-up of our stitching in case you were wondering how to do the stitch, and that's a gather stitch. And once you get these pumpkins down, you'll get addicted. You'll just start making pumpkin after pumpkin. These pumpkins can go anywhere for your fall decor. I like putting them in a big basket on a table. Craft number 7. For this craft, I'm going to start with a wood leaf that I got at the Dollar Tree. And I just love how it has 2 different layers of wood on this leaf. After removing the raffia bow from the leaf, I'm going to put the leaf on a paintable surface. And I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Moss. And we're going to paint the outside layer of this wood leaf. So while we finish painting this leaf, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. I'm from the Pacific Northwest in Washington State. Once we finish painting all of that green paint, we're going to let that dry. And now we're going to take our white Waverly chalk paint and just paint the top leaf with 1 coat of white paint. And once the white paint has dried, I grab my Mod Podge and paint another coat. And we're going to let that completely dry. So I grabbed this paper napkin, and I got this on Amazon, and I'll put the link in the description box below. But it's one of my favorite fall napkins that I've found because it has the colors I like in my house, the blue and the green and the off-white. And I feel like it's very farmhouse and very rustic. And I'm just going to go ahead and layer that top layer of the napkin over the top of the leaf. And I'm just going to cut a rough square that will fit over the top of the leaf, and we're not going to really worry about the overhang of the napkin because once we attach the napkin, we're going to burn the extra overhang off of the leaf. Right now I'm just trying to position the napkin so that I can get as much of the flowers over the white part of the leaf. Next, I'm going to put a piece of parchment paper over the top and iron that napkin straight on with the Mod Podge. Now let's grab our lighter and light the napkin. And it's amazing. It just burns that napkin straight off, and it stops right on the white part of the leaf, which is great. And there's a little bit of burn marks, but it just makes it look more rustic, and I like that look that it gives. It kind of gives it a rough look. And once you're satisfied with your edges that you've burnt off, you go ahead and just wipe down any of the extra soot off of your craft, and it may leave a few marks, but it just gives it more of a rustic look, and I'm just going to leave mine that way. Next, I grab a piece of twine, and I'm going to go ahead and hot glue that to the back of the leaf so I have a way of hanging the leaf. Next, we grab the raffia bow that was previously on this leaf, and I did use a little bit of my brown burnt umber paint, and I dry brushed the front of the bow just to give it a more rustic look. And I'm just going to attach that right on the bottom of the leaf to cover the hole that was there. And now our project is complete. I love how this turned out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember, craft more, stress less.